Okay. All right, guys. Last session, 10 to 3. You're still awake, so thank you very much. It's a long day to be sat there listening. Stop talking about games, guys. I'll throw you out. Long sessions, lunch, fatigue. So, well done for sticking around. London, lightweights, lunch, they're gone. Clearly, they were just there for the buffet. They weren't interested in Docker. Configuration management, yeah, whatever. Google it. So, thank you for sticking around. Yeah. So, I got introduced earlier. This is me, Phil Stirpé. I went to the trouble of putting a face on in case the room was quite long and you wouldn't see me from the back. But this room is quite manageable. But there's the email. We'll do that again later on. Okay, got to do a thing today, so I'll do configuration management. I like configuration management. So how did it get to this point? As Adrian mentioned earlier, I've done all sorts. I've done a bit of Agile, I've done cloud, I'm doing configuration management. So this began for me, in fact, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was March or April. That's exact, isn't it? March or April, there was beer. It was 2010, it was Helsinki. And Adrian Jakeman, who you met this morning, and I were doing a conference for Microsoft in Helsinki, Tech Days. And we'd done the thing, it was great, and it's very stressful, and we're in the bar, just putting the world to rights, which is the kind of thing you do when you're in Helsinki and there's beer, you put the world to rights. And the thing that needed putting right in my world was the build of rooms. Because the thing I was lamenting was the fact that, well, you know, we do this training, we deliver the courses, and I'm a .NET trainer, I'm doing all this delivery of courses. I need a machine that's got Visual Studio on there, I need SQL Server on there, but only for this course it's a slightly different version, and then we might want Eclipse, but then again we might want, I don't know, Entity Framework 6, or didn't have 6 then, 4. When we designed a course, I'd go in, write the course and work out the spec, and then I would tell a guy who worked for QA, and he works in Milton Keynes, he's called Dave in fact, here's the build for the course. So I'm finishing off the course, I'm testing out my labs, it works on my machine. He'd go away and build that, he'd build it, he'd ghost it, and then he'd ghost that out onto 15 different types of machine, just to test everything worked okay. And then we could run it in a classroom. And then actually occurred 6 weeks after I'd sent him a list, because that was a lot of stuff to do, because there were lots of other courses. And so I was there with Adrian, we're in the bar in Helsinki, it was very cold, but the beer helped. I said, do you know what I want? Do you know what I want? And this is before I even had a smartphone. In fact, it's probably before I even knew what a smartphone was. So I picked up my Nokia, and I said, do you know what I want? I want to go to my room tonight thinking, what do I need on a machine tomorrow? And I'll just get a couple of check boxes, tick this, tick that, type in the number 16, hit a button, go to bed. And I get up in the morning, and those machines would be built. Imagine that, imagine that. Oh yeah, imagine that. And he's like, ta-da, that's it, Adrian. We do that, we're minted. That's going to make us. We'll start a startup, we'll be a startup. You and me, Adrian, we'll do it.
I've got to say, actually, most people talk about carbon in the product.
Well, you see, the thing is, I don't do football. I'm no longer getting cabs in London. I've overcome my claustrophobia. I never used to do the tube. But every time I get in a cab at Euston on the Sunday night, it's where are you from? Burnley. And it's off of football. I said, oh, come on. So I can't do football. So we just talk about computers for a bit. And, so that was a grand plan. That was, oh yeah, okay. And so I've had a real job. I've had a day job, and it's involved development. Part of that was web security, do some web security. But all the while in the back, there's been that little thing in the back room I've just been working on. And it's had various names. It's been the Cloud Builder, but it was only the Cloud Builder after I discovered what the cloud was. I was trying to make this work on real machines. And at various points, I had to figure out virtualization, because virtualization was going to be part of this story. And automation, of course, automation was part of everything. And I thought the big thing, I thought the really difficult bit was going to be this spin up a machine, a virtual machine, with a line of code. I thought it was going to be really hard. As it turned out, it wasn't. That was really easy. It was the getting Visual Studio, SQL Server, all the other course files, various configuration files on all the bits. That was the tricky bit. But over time, I got it done. Over time, my PowerShell skills had to go, because I was just that developer. The idea was this madcap idea, and nobody was interested in playing that game. Particularly as I wouldn't talk about football for the quid pro quo. No, he just wants to talk about this weird thing. So I had to learn a bit of PowerShell, learn a bit of VMware, didn't like that, a bit of Hyper-V, didn't want to go there either. So I learned some PowerShell, and this script grew. I was writing a script, and this script grew and grew and grew and grew. And it would be, I'd figure out the PowerShell to download and install Visual Studio. And it worked. It was like, yes. And then I'd figure out another bit of code to do the SQL Server bit. And this script just grew longer and longer. And I knew in my heart, I'm a developer, I could auto-generate that file. So I know it's long and unwieldy now, but I could imagine that app, tick some boxes, write some PowerShell code. And I was really proud of this thing. And this thing grew in the same way you hear about these things on the bad news day. On the Look Northwest, we've got nothing to talk about. Let's talk about the guy called Frank who built the scale model of the Ark Royal out of matchsticks in his dining room. He's been building it for 7 years and now, can't get out the back door. That kind of stuff. So this PowerShell script. So I was at an AWS conference, I'm telling about my PowerShell script, and me in Helsinki. And I said, yeah, we chef for that. Chef. Google chef. Stays up all night, pulls an all-nighter, the rest is history. So I came to Chef and Puppet not because, as often happens with a company like ours, there's a thing called Chef, there's a thing called Puppet, we should do a course on that. We came to it because I had a problem to solve. And I solved it one way, then I solved it another way, then I solved it in a better way. So a lot of the tools I come across because in the beginning there was a problem and then I found a tool to help me with it. So this thing that I'm trying to do, this problem I'm trying to solve is configuration management. I want to be able to configure a machine. This might be a bare metal machine. This might be a piece of tin. I want to get it configured. It might be in the cloud. Every little graphic we show here that represents a machine, a node, it could be a real machine, it could be a virtual machine, it could be a virtual machine on a real machine, it could be a virtual machine in the cloud, it could be a container. A machine's a machine as far as I'm concerned. Okay? So, a couple of contexts. One context would be, I have a machine, bare metal or a vanilla Windows machine or vanilla Linux machine, I want to get that configured. What I want to do is I want to put, maybe it's a web server. Okay, what makes it a web server? Apache, I want some code, maybe it's a Java app, maybe it's a PHP app, maybe it's a .NET app, so we're not talking about Apache, we're talking about IIS and Windows, whatever it is. I want to build that. So probably if I'm going to be using a tool to build out a machine, to configure a machine, I've probably got a couple of roles in mind. And I don't particularly mind whether you do layered architecture or you don't, whether you have web servers and you have application servers or database servers. You either do layers or you don't do layers. Whether you do or you don't, you have different types of machine, you have different roles. There's a type of build, there's another type of build, there's another type of build. So if you can articulate that, if you can write that down, if you can describe it in some way, then what we now need is something that can do that for us, because of course, automate all the things. Why not? Because once you automate, things become easier. But look at this. It wasn't just a case of build out a web server. Yeah, you've got an application server, and the thing is the web application server needs to know about this middle tier, and then the middle tier needs to know about the database layer. I don't care. Because I know I'm going to automate this, and there's going to be a tool that will do this for me, and whatever tool builds out a web server will also do that configuration bit, because probably it built out the application server, harvested the IP of that application server, made a note, and then when it built the web server, put the two together. So I'm not worried. And then, because I'm automating, then I can scale, because I don't want web server. I don't want, one web server, I want several web servers. Now, if we're in an environment where we can do the spin up the new machines bit, then whatever tool we're going to talk about, and spoiler alert, we're probably going to talk about Chef and Puppet, they will just do the bits. So we need something that's going to spin up the machines, and then something that's going to populate them. So the Chef and the Puppet are going to do the populating, the configuration management. Something else will be spinning up these other machines. Now, Kat's already mentioned, we do a lot of work in Amazon Web Services. It's a thing. It could be Azure, it could be anything. Okay, it's Amazon Web Services. Doesn't make it a good thing or a bad thing, it just makes it a thing. Well, Amazon Web Services has got a feature called auto scaling. Just before we go any further, hands up anyone who does Amazon Web Services. Just 2 of us then. Okay, right. Go get it, it's good fun. So they have a feature called auto scaling, and you define a group of machines. There are 5 of them. Now, AWS's job will be, once you've said I've got X number of machines, they're either Linux machines or Windows machines or Ubuntu machines, it maintains a group of that size, maintains a fleet of 5 or a fleet of 10 or a fleet of 1,000. And then you can say to it, okay, well, based upon some metrics, it's getting busy, average CPU use is going up, we need some more machines, it'll spin some more machines up. It's gone a bit quiet, get rid of some, gets rid of some. And so automatically spin up machines, tear down machines, spin up machines, tear down machines. So within that context, having something that when a brand new machine spins up, installs all the bits, that'd be fantastic. And that's where Chef and Puppet, other tools are available, quotes, come in, okay? CF Engine's another one. How many of you are familiar with Ansible? Ansible? It's another thing, okay? I'll mention them later on, just out of a sense of completeness. So if we can automate the build of a machine, then we can just keep doing that. Let's scale. Let's have another one. Let's have another one. Let's have another one. And if we can do that with a web server, we'll be able to do it with the application servers and the database servers. Oh, a load balancer. Okay, you want a load balancer. That's another type of thing. So we have a build for a web server. We have a build for an application server. We have a build for a load balancer. What is that? I don't know. It's a machine with a router on it. Okay. Provided we've got a tool that can populate or bootstrap these machines, harvest the IPs, give them to the load balancer, my work is done. Don't forget the application servers, don't forget the data. This is starting to get really messy. I don't care, because I've solved the problem. I know there's a tool that if I tell it what an application server looks like, it can build me an application server. And I can say, every time you do that, build a machine, populate the machine, configure the machine, get its IP, and do something else with it. So all of this plumbing can be done, provided there's something that can be spinning up the machines. I've already mentioned that AWS can spin up machines. Now, Puppet and Chef, might have mentioned them. Puppet and Chef, their job is really put all the bits in play. It's not really about spin up the brand new machines. Now, Chef have recently released a feature tool called Chef Provisioning. So Chef Provisioning thing is spins up boxes. So you get Chef and AWS together, and Chef can say to AWS, spin up another box, and then leave it to me, and I'll get it configured. So we can actually use Chef for the spinning up of the boxes bits. And I keep saying AWS, but Azure's got a Z in it, and I don't do Z, okay? For no other reason. We're automating. Okay, that's brilliant. We lose, excuse me, I got too clumsy with my thumb. We lose a machine because we lose machines. If we'd hand-rolled this for a start, I would have lost a lot of hair getting this far. Losing a machine would be really bad because now I've got to get another machine into play. And if I was going to have to put a new machine in play manually, that's going to take a lot of effort because I've got to get the little playbook out on how do you build a web server, we've got to install this bit, install that bit. The very fact you're doing it manually means you're doomed anyway, because not only are you putting in effort, you're going to do it differently this time. I don't care what it is you do differently, but you'll do something differently this time. You'll have missed a bit, or you've done something twice, or you've done something in the wrong order. Either way, the replacement will not be the same as the others. But if we've got a tool that built those 3, we can spin it up and it can do that one. And all the other bits it's supposed to do. Spin up a new web server, put in all the bits, get its IP, tell the load balancer, tell it where the application servers are. Now I probably want a second iteration at that because I'm not happy with this bit. There's a lot of tightly coupled bits there. I would probably have another load balancer here. And once I've figured out that architecture, I'll just tell Chef or I'll tell Puppet. Okay. So this is one scenario, this is one context where configuration management will help us. Spinning up brand new machines, installing the bits. Now Kat made a point earlier during the container piece about storing data locally, storing data on a container, and we don't, it's gone. You close a container if you lost your data. Now, depending on the context now, that's either going to matter or it's not going to matter. If these are, quotes, real machines, then if you've got some data generated, stored on the disk or on the volume, and then that machine goes, then you're probably going to be a bit upset. But if you're in a way of thinking where these nodes, be they literally on tin or virtual machines, they never store local data. They don't store data on the machine. They provide a service. It might be a microservice. It could be a web application. But any data they generate, they store it off the machine. Because we know at a moment's notice we could lose a machine. Performance-wise, we can replace it. But any data that machine held isn't there anymore. And that's an architectural thing. Do you store data locally or not? Do you have stateful services? Yes or no? Well, that's not a chef or puppet thing. That's an architecture thing. We're just looking at spinning up the boxes and configuring them. Another scenario to think about is once we've got a machine configured, then what? So we've designed the Uber web server and we get chef or puppet, say, go on, build that. Done. Okay. Oh, I need to change. Got to change. Maybe we've changed the version of Apache, maybe we've added a library, maybe we've changed the version of this, maybe we've changed an entry in a config file. So over time, we want to update what it means to be a web server. In fact, I don't just want to update what it means to be a web server, I want to update those web servers. Well, if we've got a tool that can build out a brand new vanilla machine and put all the bits on, well, how hard would it be for that same tool to go back to those machines and say, just a minute, here's a change. And any half-decent configuration management tool, like Chef or Puppet or any others I could mention, will do that. How they do it will vary on the tool. But something we'll hear about later on is both Chef and Puppet have solved this problem in the same way. When you're using Chef and or Puppet, let me just reverse for a minute. Each of these nodes that we're trying to manage, be they virtual or containers or real, it could be desktops. It could be desktop, it could be all the training machines, imagine that. All the training machines around the building. On those machines is whatever the base operating system is. Most of our machines have Windows, just saying. And Chef or Puppet, an agent. So you install Chef or Puppet on those machines. So when you roll out a new machine into production, it's the base operating system and then the agent, be it Chef or Puppet. How it got there we'll talk about later on, but that's a thing you're going to have to figure out. So when a brand new machine pops out of thin air, poof, appears, it's a Windows, Linux, Ubuntu machine with Chef or Puppet on it. And then it checks into a master. How does it know where the master is? I'll tell you in a minute. But it checks in with the master. It says, hello, I'm Agent X. What should I be doing? Oh, Agent X. Look, you're a web server. You want this lot. Do this. Install all these bits. So if we've already got that environment where all of our nodes have got the agent on, whatever that agent is, Chef or Puppet, all we've got to do is describe to that machine, here's what you should look like. Now, the first time it checks in, there's nothing there. You're a web server, so that means Apache, that means this, it means that, it means the other. I haven't got those, I better go and do that. And the agent will go and do that and install all the bits. Brilliant, so that took care of the bootstrapping bit. Updates and patches. Imagine this is what you had. Now, I'll ask you to pay particular attention to the top row, the web server row. Because my palette of colours may not be the most ideal choice. It looked okay on the Pendolino back from Houston one night, but maybe now it doesn't work so well. But imagine I've decided on a new version of Apache. And I've told the master, next time any of those web servers check in, we're on version X of Apache. Okay. So they all check in. Next version. Because these agents, the way these agents work is by default, and if it says default, it could be anything you like, you're in charge. Every 30 minutes, the Chef or Puppet agent will check in. Hi, it's me again. Glad you called. Here's what it means to be a web server. That's different. I'll correct that, and it makes the change. Time passes as time does. And then different libraries. Are we using this library now? Or we've changed that file now, and then that file's now become green. And because there's this continual checking in with the master, hello, I'm Node X, hello. You should have this. I've got this. Great, bye. It's done. But sometime, what we're supposed to look like will differ from what we actually look like. The agent will fix it. Now, this is either because we've changed it on the master to say, here's the new way to be a web server, or it's drifted. Something has happened on a node. Probably you left port 22 open, or 3389, just because you want to be able to get in there and have a bit of a mooch. And you or someone that you work with has tweaked a machine, just got on there, modified a config file. The next time that the Puppet agent or Chef client checks in, it goes, oh, file, hang on, that file's different. That file's changed, it's drifted. We're out of policy. Overwrites it, fixes it. Now, you might be a bit gutted because you just changed the file. I'm sorry, why did you just change the file? Why did you manually SSH to that machine out of the 1,000 web servers you've got, that one, and modify the config file? Shouldn't have done it. We put it back. So if we're doing configuration management, we shouldn't be doing SSH and modify thing. Okay? So there's two scenarios, two contexts. There's the setting it up in the first place context, the bootstrapping context, and there's the updates and patches, or the correcting drift. Okay. Come back to that idea of what about the data? What about the data? What if you lost the machine? This next thing I want to talk about works well in a cloud environment. Rip and replace, rip and replace. If you are dealing with real servers, these cloud machines, as we know, they are real servers, but it's abstracted away, it's in the cloud. Well, the cloud's a data center in Dublin or Frankfurt or Singapore or Tokyo. It's just not your data center. Someone has managed that for you. If this were a real machine and you decide to change the configuration in some way, you might well do it in place. If this is in the cloud, you might be thinking, do you know what? Chuck it, start another one from scratch. Both Chef and Puppet will allow you, when you, and we'll see some code in a bit, when you write the manifest or when you write the recipe, we'll say, must have this, must have that, must have the other. And over time, you've changed your mind what it means to be a web server, and you've thought, we no longer want this, we no longer want that, we no longer want the other. But I know they're there because we put them there before. So what I need to do is say to Chef or Puppet, make sure that such and such isn't there anymore. Now, over time, your recipes or your manifests are going to be as full of as many make sure the followings aren't there as make sure we put the following in. Because you're correct, and you're not managing drift. What you're doing is removing things that you put there before. But after they've all checked in within 30 minutes, well, then that's kind of redundant because you should have got rid of everything. But then these things start to become a bit bloated and a bit unmanageable. So you could think, do you know what? Chuck those away, and here's a new way of doing things. Nice chap, got to say nice chap, I've never met the chap, but it's called Gavin anyway, and he works at CERN. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. And he put forward an idea, and he was talking about pets versus cattle. Has anyone seen this thing? It's not my thing, it's a thing. It's done the rounds. The service model, pets, cattle. And the thought popped into my head. It actually, as it does occasionally, popped into my head on the toilet. I was just remembering the bit about Skynet. And that made me smile, made everyone smile. So I'm just wondering, how many of you have got a server or a tool called Hicks or Hudson or Ripley? Do you actually give names to servers? Anyone got a server with a name? Don't tell me what it is, because that could be me fishing for some information. Got my web security hat on. Got names, okay. Names are typically, if you name stuff within your organization, it's usually a sci-fi thing. Hicks, Hudson, depends what movie you like, doesn't it really? It's going to be a Star Warsy name, it's going to be, maybe it's an astronomy name. There's Pluto, there's Uranus, there's Mars. I said this actually in London, I said, because no one does trees, and this hand kind of went up. We've got trees. So we've got a server called Oak, and we've got a server called Sycamore. Good luck with that. Because why? Because you give them names. You want to identify with these machines, and that's the file server's Sycamore, and I don't know, Ripley's the website. I don't know. Teletubbies. Just stop right there. Would this be the one you shut down that had the local authorities' data on it? No. Okay. Teletubbies. That takes me back. Give them names. The trouble with that, trouble giving it names is you invest a kind of a character. In fact, sometimes these servers change names to mimic their behaviour. Now, I've also told this anecdote for the past 2 years, so this must now be about 2.5 years old. There was a guy, and sadly I can't remember his name, and he had a server called Marvin. Okay? If you're not sure why, Google it, it'll come to you. So he had a server, and it was called Marvin. And the way he described it, I'm not sure it always was called Marvin, it just became called Marvin. And he had a problem, the guy, not Marvin, because Marvin was just a machine. This guy's problem was that one day Marvin was going to fail spectacularly. And he didn't have a plan B. So he had a plan, what are you going to do when Marvin fails? And the plan was, pick up Tupperware box, put underarm, walk out the building and never come back. Because I think the technical term goes, he would have been buggered. The machine, I think it was an Oracle machine, it might have been a SQL Server machine, but the point is, it was a database and every day they dutifully backed it up and they had the backups and everything was by the day, by the week, by the month. And they had built several times the standby machine, and it was top spec machine, and they'd installed it in all the patches, and they'd done the restore, and they tested it, and it wouldn't work. So they said, we've got a plan, it just doesn't work. And they knew it didn't work. And they couldn't tell you, they didn't know what was it about Marvin that made it Marvin. Because all they had written down was, I don't know, Windows box, so many cores, so much memory, so much disk space, SQL Server, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we've done all that, it still doesn't work. So over the years, people have just tinkered around with it, bit of blue tack, bit of string, gaffer tape, tapped it a bit of 3-in-1, WD-40, my dad does that, WD-40, that'll fix it. No, all right. And it still doesn't work because there's been no trail. And I'm a great fan of not just infrastructure as code, but anything in code. 'Cause if it was in code, if that code built that, well, you run that code again, you got another one. Simple. I come from a simple place, it's Burnley. Actually, I come from a place outside Rome, but I just live in Burnley out of choice. Go figure. And I don't do football. We have a friend, well, my wife's got a friend, but she's my friend as well, had a kitten, got run over, £7,500 later, cat's okay. Now, I don't know. I've not been in that position. I don't know. I'm just saying to you, I don't know. Okay. So his point was, he's a pet and you love it and he's got eyes this big. You're going to do everything in your power to get that kitten well again, to get Marvin working again. And he said, you should think of your machines. And this isn't the puppet bit and the chef bit, this is the context bit. Think of them as cattle. You've got a lot of cattle. They all look kind of the same, broadly the same, red and white. Red and white, where's that come from? Black and white or brown and white, that's the thing I was looking for. And they've got tags and they've got numbers and that's it. And you lose a cow, you get another one. Well, clearly Gavin doesn't live on a farm. I live on a farm. And I know a few farmers. And I'll tell you something, if the farmer I know, one of his cows was poorly, he would get the vetting. Because his cows average about £800, £900. Now, to be honest, if it was a weekend, they'd have to wait till Monday. But he will be getting the vetting. And if it's a bank holiday, they're going to have to hold on till Tuesday, because he's not going to call the vet out on a bank holiday Monday. But he is going to call the vet. So I think that the trick that Gavin missed there was he should have been thinking more about poultry. Oh, excuse me. He should have been thinking about chickens. Now imagine, you've got a barn with 1,000 chickens. And please, I don't want to come across as callous in any way. Okay? But what I'm saying is, if you've got a barn and you've got 1,000 hens in that barn, and their job is, web server, serve content, lay an egg. Sun goes up, lay an egg, sun goes down. Sun comes up, lay an egg, sun goes down. And this happens. And then one day, that hen stops laying eggs. Now, it's been laying eggs quite well for the past year. So, the biology's okay, that's fine. Got through its test okay. It's just stopped. Now, what we could do at this point is go, okay, bit of a quiet day. I'll Google eggs. Discover red mite. Google it, it's a thing. Red mite. Oh, this is me. I'm SSHing into the hen. What's up with the hen? Can you imagine? And then I think, oh no. I like chicken soup. Pot, get another hen in. Okay? Cloud computing, I'm telling you. Now, Marvin, you can't do that with Marvin, can you? Because get a Marvin, chuck it out. You haven't got a plan B. You haven't got a plan B. So, bless. Okay? So, a lot of assumptions I make when I talk about configuration management and spinning up is that isn't going to be there for long. And actually, if the configuration is going to change, I'm actually not going to think about or worry about undoing things. What I'm going to do is have a new specification, new machines look like this, get rid of the old ones. Okay? Without loss of service, we can manage that. Build up some spare capacity, the new ones, and tear down the old ones. We can do that, load balance. So, there's the context. We want a configuration management tool. I better go move on because you guys are going to leave in about 20 minutes. You're going to miss the big finish, but what can I do? Video will be supplied. We're after a tool that's going to help us manage our infrastructure, to keep track of these nodes and go, they're web servers, and then these are read replicas. So some mechanism for classification. And what are the applications and the packages that we want on these machines? And then the data. And also its own data. If you think about a tool like Chef or Puppet, it's got to keep track of all this. So it has its own database. It's got a list of all the nodes and what all the configurations are, and which node's got what configuration, and which one hasn't checked in yet. All that's to be managed. We want it to be able to take the code we write, validate it, and go, that's not right, is it? To audit the machines we've got, to take a look at the estate that we've defined and realise that certain nodes haven't checked in. Or, crikey, all these machines you reckon are web servers, but those two are different. Ask me, I'll tell you why they're different, but somehow they're different. Would you like me to do something about that? Yeah. Benefits, lots of words with ility, and lots of the benefits that we saw this morning about automation and benefits of automation and things we get from DevOps. But if we can, in code, configure a machine, if we can hit a button, what was that word? That was easy. That's easy button. I want another server, no problem. Hit the red button, there's another web server. I need another 10. What if this is I play for the BBC? I play for the BBC, Strictly Come Dancing, 6:30, everyone's on there to see how Carol Kirkwood gets on. Will someone please put Carol out of her misery? I love Carol dearly. I don't know who suggested she should go on that programme, but it's painful. It's like a family member. No, come off. 6:30, it's going to go bananas. Everyone's on the red button. We need more servers. Spin them up. So that's fine. We could just keep churning them all out. They're all going to be the same. Homogeneity, they're all the same. Accuracy, yeah, because everyone looks the same. We've scripted it. There's nothing random in there at all. Lots of words with ility on it. So tell me of some tools, Phil. I've got no idea what tools we could be talking about. We could be talking about Chef and Puppet. Okay. There's also CF Engine. Yeah, okay. There is. I know it exists. I've heard of it. I've never played with it. Chef and Puppet. So my plan now in the time remaining, get a move on, Phil, is I want to spend about 15 minutes on Chef and 15 minutes on Puppet and do a demo for each. That's the cunning plan. Okay? All right. So we needed a graphic. Let's get a funny graphic for Chef. And I got this and I suddenly thought, hey, this works on 2 levels. Because he's a chef and he's a puppet. And then I thought, no, it works on 3. Yeah, which guys at front just got chicken. So that just sums up the presentation. If you have nothing else to take away, it was the Swedish chef thing. What is configuration management? That is configuration management. Okay, so we've got to do Chef. Now here's the thing. I'm going to do 2 demos, and one demo is really quick, and that's the last demo. And the other demo, the one I'm going to do now, takes a while. And this is the one that Dave mentioned before. That I'm going to spin up a machine, and that machine I'm going to install all sorts of bits. He did say Visual Studio, that wasn't true. But it's going to put on SQL Server, it's going to put on SQL Express, it's going to put on their Notepad++ and Chrome COS, and plus all the student files we need for a particular course. Because actually I'm going to be doing a demo to the IT director. So back in the day, March or April, it's a bit vague, 2010, there was me and Adrian drinking a beers, I want to do this. Monday's my pitch. It's taken 5 years. It took a while, but big demo. So I'm going to do the demo I'm going to be doing for him. I don't think I'll put the Swedish chef in because he doesn't do humour. Show me. I say that I do have a cunning plan, but I'll share it with you in a minute. Now, the thing is, I've timed it. It takes 15 minutes to build a machine, which 5 minutes is bad. Can you imagine? So, in true Blue Peter fashion, the plan is I'm just going to pop one in the oven, then talk about the code. And when I finish the code, it'll be like, ta-da! That's the plan. Okay, so just bear with me, because I can't do that bending over, typing, talking, thinking, and spelling at the same time. So I'm just going to take the standing bit out of the equation. Hopefully you can still hear me at the back. You don't have to see me, because you're going to be looking at the screen. But just so we know what's going on, I'm going to be doing my thing, get rid of that, in Amazon Web Services. I could be doing this on a machine, I could be doing this in Azure. So as you don't do AWS, none of this will make much sense, so I'll just tell you the highlights. I'm going to be launching a machine, and there are different types of base machine you can launch. Have a Linux machine, have an Ubuntu machine. I'm going to go for a Windows Server 2008 machine. Why? Because I've tested it on a Windows 2008 machine. But it should be on any Windows server, it'd be good. So that's a good to go vanilla machine. Now, this is a nothing up my sleeves bit. You just have to trust me, and AWS, that this machine won't already have SQL Server, SQL Express, student files from our TSQL course, Notepad++, and Chrome. Okay. Trust me, I'm from Burnley. Okay. So apparently I've got a brown voice. Google it, it's a thing. So I'm going to launch, I'm going to go for an M4 X large. How about that? It's got 4 cores, 16 gig of memory, none of which is important. The important bit is this bit here. The machines in AWS can either have low, high, or medium network capacity. They don't have any numbers. It's like T-shirts again, isn't it? Give me a fast network, because I've got to download software on the fly. So that's going to spin up a machine. Now then, this bit, which we don't have to worry about, this bit here is just setting permissions for the machine. Any code on this machine can do certain stuff. The stuff it needs to do on my machine is talk to a service in AWS called S3 and download some things called cookbooks. That's that bit. The most important bit here is, if I click in advanced details, I'm going to open up a file, which I'll talk you through in a minute whilst we're waiting for the thing to cook. So if I go into Chef, I'm going to pass it a PowerShell script. Not the big Ark Royal I used to work on. It's more like a little speedboat. I'll show you that in a minute. And just one last thing. Now, apparently, my wife likes to use this anecdote all the time. A barrister never asks a question they don't know the answer to. So in my world, that should be never do a demo you don't know is going to work. Okay? So I've told you, I've done this demo. I've practiced it for the IT director next week. Now, in theory, I could build 20 machines on the fly, 4 machines on the fly, or 1, and get the same result. So every time I've done this demo, there's been a number 1 in that box. I'm saying to Amazon, spin me up a machine. And then Adrian Jakeman, head of IT, said, go on, spin up 20. Go on. Put it on expenses. All right, then. So I'm going to go for 20. I'm going to go for 20. And this isn't showbiz. I've never tried this before. And if it fails, do you know what? I'll never see you again. Actually, no, you're the Manchester crowd. I might see you again and point to me on the street. Go, how's that guy? Just like, made it all up. So this is going to be 20 vanilla Windows boxes spinning up, and I'm going to get Chef to configure each one. Can you imagine? So, okay, storage, how big do the disks need to be? I'm going to say, give me 60. There's a lot of stuff coming on. I think I can get away with 52. All right, what are you going to call it? Well, every one of them is going to be called Chef Demo. We can tag them. That's an AWS thing. Let's not worry. Now then, so what AWS says is, oh, hang on, let me just do that thing. And so I can do that thing. Marvelous. So AWS says, okay, it's a Windows box. You want to do that? Oh, you don't do SSH, do you? Because that's a Linux thing. Okay, we'll open up 3389 so you can RDP into it. Okay, which, of course, you wouldn't do in the real world unless you're doing a demo and you want to say, oh, look, SQL Server. Left that open. Do you want any more ports open? No. No, I'm not like Cat. I'm not going to say get them all open. I just want 3389. Yeah, but I could open some more. Is that what you want? Do you really want 20 Windows machines? Yeah. Go for it. What's the worst that could happen? In fact, I have misspoken. Misspoken. That's a phrase, isn't it? That's a politician's phrase. The thing that Adrian did say to me, and this is just going to spin. I'll just put 20 buns in the oven, metaphorically. He said launch 21. I don't know where that number came from. However, with my account in AWS, I can only have 20 running at any given time. So I said, I'll haggle, let's do 20. So moving on, so I've just popped those into the oven. Let's talk about Chef. Let's talk about Chef. Should take 15 minutes to bake a machine. So Chef is a configuration management tool. Its job is to do all the things I've been describing. Install stuff on a machine. And I said, well, there could be a master. Could be a master. I haven't got a master. There are a couple of ways you can play this. You can either have a master, so it could be a puppet master or a chef master. They're not called chef masters, they're called chef servers, but the principle's the same. There could be a master server and they all check in with. Or you can manage it. All you've got to do is figure out a way of getting chef or puppet onto a machine. Maybe by passing it a PowerShell script or a bash script. Installing Chef or Puppet, giving it some code to work with, and leaving it alone. So that's what I've done. Let me show you this. I passed that launching machine. Let me just go and find the folder. I passed it, Chef, this file. It's a PowerShell file, lots of weird functions in there. The important thing is around about, here's where it starts. So I passed in, because Amazon lets me do this, Amazon lets me pass a PowerShell script to a launching Windows machine or a bash script to a launching Linuxy, Ubuntu machine. All I'm doing is downloading the installer for Chef. So this demo is for a Windows machine and the other demo is on a Linux machine. So part of my responsibility is get Chef on the machine in the first place. Okay? So this is me getting the Chef installer on the machine in the first place. Then I'm downloading all these things called cookbooks that we've not talked about yet. So I'm downloading all the cookbooks. And then I get down here and I'll tell you about that file in a minute, node.json. And then I run the installer. So I download the installer for Chef, I download the cookbooks, I install Chef, and then this line says, go on Chef, off you go. That's it, step out, shut the door, go over brew. That's my job, okay? There's other bits, there's lots of little logging bits in there. But if you're a developer, you do all those little debug print things. Am I there yet, am I there yet, am I there yet? And this is just logging out to a queue. It's gonna work, I've got every confidence. 20 machines. Okay, so you can either do it with a master or without a master. Now, if I was going to do it with a master, I might have a similar thing there. I might have to spin up a brand new machine, put Chef on, install Chef, but then when I run it, I'll say, look over there at that master. It'll tell you what to do. I wouldn't download the cookbooks, I wouldn't do that piece. I'll just change glasses because you look a bit fuzzy. It's better. They don't do varifocals. They don't do varifocals. I tried varifocals, I crashed the car. I don't do varifocals anymore. And also with all that reading nonsense. Can't be done. No. So Chef, we need a way to describe to this tool, Chef, here's what I want you to do. So Chef came up with this idea. They put a lot of thought into the metaphor. Recipes. Like what you did there. Recipes. Okay. So recipes is specification. Now the recipe isn't necessarily the instructions. The recipe is just saying we should have this, we should have that, we should have the other. Now, to me, they missed a trick. They missed a massive trick, and I have emailed them, and they've not responded. Your recipe is full of resources. I'm thinking, you see, you ask me, and I go on ingredients. See? You get it? Oh, it's not Phil Stirpé again. Probably got a filter now. I've got a rule in the inbox. Phil Stirpé, Phil Stirpé. Ingredients works for me. Resources, the resources. Okay, so what do you want on a machine? Well, what would you put on a machine? You put on packages. Put on a package, put on a package, put on a package. Packages, what do they make? Services. Start a service, start a service. So we have resources like packages. Put on HA proxy, install HA proxy. And down here we've got service. Make sure HA proxy is running. It's started. It's enabled. It restarts. This doesn't say install HA proxy. It says HA proxy should be installed. So imagine the agent, the first time it checks in, goes, oh, HA proxy should be installed. Has a look around. No, there's no HA proxy. So it will go and get HA proxy, the installer, and install it. Because it knows where all the repos are. Now this is an interesting point. Windows machine, Linux machine, Ubuntu machine. If you're going to install HA proxy, or you're going to install Apache, or you're going to install Git, or whatever it's going to be, you might do a yum. Or you might do an apt-get install. Or you might run an MSI. It depends on the environment. What's Chef's problem? It's not your problem. So once Chef is on there, you just say Apache, and it'll go, ooh, I'll do an apt-get. And it takes care of it. You just said I want Apache. So if it looks around and it can't see Apache, it will go figure out where the repo is for Apache. It will use the appropriate installer, and it will install it. Now, 30 minutes later, it checks in. Apache should be installed. Yep. Next thing on the list, because it's installed. What's it got to do? Nothing. Template. Another big thing is on a machine, you're going to want files. It could be configuration files. It could be web files. It could be RSS feed files. It could be anything. Now, there is a resource type called file. You'll see it later on, file. If you say file, what you're saying to it is come back to the server, see this file, that's the file. And just drop that file on the machine. So you literally give it a file name. More often than not, the files we're dealing with are config files. And if you're talking about config files, there's a very good chance there's a value that needs to go into that file that is relevant to that machine. So whenever Chef checks in with the server to go, hello, I'm a web server, by the by, my IP is this, my DNS is that, or my MAC address is the other, the master's going to say, okay, here's a file for you, just a minute, I'll take that piece of information that you just gave me, I'll put it in this file, I'll give it you back. So the configuration file for HA proxy or for Apache or whatever it is contains something to do with the node it's on. It's been dynamically created. And this is a major feature of Chef or Puppet, the template. If you make a start on Chef or Puppet, so day one you're doing the kind of stuff we're doing. By day two, I guarantee it, you'll be doing templates. I've not come across one organization who uses Puppet or Chef in production that don't use templates. There'll be some file that needs to be auto-generated. Now, template files, by default, by convention, by default, by convention, have ERB on the end. We're going to generate a file called HA proxy config. Okay. Using this template file called HA proxy config ERB. That's a convention. Put ERB on the end of your template name. Why? Because ERB stands for embedded Ruby.
I thought it was the herbs in the recipe.
Say again?
I thought it was the herbs in the recipe.
The herbs to the recipe. Ready? Ba-boom. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ba-boom. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'll use that tomorrow. I'll pretend it was mine. Templates. So I like to dynamically configure, so dynamically generate the file. Okay? So that's what a recipe is. It's a list of things that got to be on the machine. This package, make sure the service is started, this file. And Chef will look at the recipe, apply the recipe. Okay? Well, it doesn't work like that really, does it? Because what happens is a recipe is just a file with some ingredients, some resources in it. How do we get that file onto a machine? We need some kind of delivery mechanism, because it won't be enough to get the recipe onto either a machine that's going to look after itself, like the 20 I've just spun up, or onto the master. Here's a file. Because hang on a minute, where's this template you're talking about? Where's this condiment we're talking about? Oh. So we need some kind of packaging mechanism. We need a mechanism to take a number of recipes, maybe more than one, group them together that we can use to deploy. And they've thought about this for about 2 nanoseconds and said, cookbook. So chef have come up with this idea of a cookbook. You don't go to Waterstones, or the bookshops do exist, by the way, but you don't go to Waterstones and go to the cooking section and get a recipe. You get a cookbook. You get a Nigella cookbook. You get a Jamie Oliver cookbook. You get a cookbooks that are specialist on baking. I don't know, but it's lots of recipes. So you tend to write several recipes, but they tend to be related. What you don't do is have one cookbook with every recipe you're ever going to need. So I have this book. I started it a few years ago when I started getting into cooking, and then I discovered welding, and I don't bother anymore. But I had this book of Dad's recipes. Can you imagine? Dad's recipes, and it's all sorts in there. Chamboloni cake. It was brilliant. No, you have a cookbook per thing. So you have a cookbook for Apache. You have a cookbook for Nginx. You have a cookbook for SQL Server. That seems a bit overkill. A cookbook for one recipe. Well, I didn't say there was one recipe, because there are 4 ways of making chamboloni that I know of. There's my dad's way, there's my Zia Melia's way, there's Zia Chisira's way, and there's Zia Pasquale's way. 4 different ways. Maybe there's 6 different ways of installing MySQL. Maybe you want the server tools, you want the client tools, you want all of it, or just the backup bit. So it allows you to have multiple recipes. Fancy, they give you a directory called recipes. And here's the thing, a cookbook isn't a funky installer. A cookbook is a directory. No magic, that's all it is, a directory. It's a directory, has a name. Ooh, HA proxy, or MySQL, or SQL Server. It's a directory. The fact that that directory lives in another one called cookbooks is the clue. If you create a directory and you put it into the cookbooks directory, that makes it a cookbook. So now there should be a directory in there called recipes. And inside the recipes directory should be at least one file that's a recipe. The first one, by default, is called default RB. So inside there, inside default RB, bearing in mind we're in the cookbook called HA proxy, will be, if I reverse, this file. So that is my default file. So this is my recipe, my default recipe for HA proxy. But there could be more than one. Where's that template you keep telling me about? It's in the templates directory. Now there's a naming convention. So if you've got a file that relates to a particular recipe, a particular way of doing HA proxy, well, we use the name. Look, default matches that file name. Okay? So that's how Chef can find the config file that goes with the recipe. So a cookbook, all it is, it's a piece of cardboard around lots of pages in a bookshop. It's just a directory around some files. There's no installer, there's nothing to install, there's nothing to register. You take the thing, you unzip the thing, you drop it in cookbooks, it's done, it's installed. And Chef can see it. We're missing a bit. You want to write recipes, you write recipes. You want to group them together to ease the management of these recipes, cookbooks. But you need a mechanism to say to Chef, I want to apply this recipe to that machine, or this machine. What's your run list? You go to the Christmas party. You booked on your Christmas party yet? Have you had to choose what you're going to have for starter and your main course and your dessert yet? You had that? Or have you carried it with the ride and said, I'm coming, but I'm not going to sit next to Frank. I don't want to be on the same table as Jackie. Have you done that bit yet? I've done that bit. The run list. So the run list is Parma ham and melon. We're having that recipe for the starter. And the main, we're going to follow that up with, I don't know, beef Wellington. And then we'll finish off with profiteroles. That's my run list. So we need this third thing. We've got to say to Chef, for this machine, I want the following recipes in this order. Because I don't want profiteroles at the start, because that would just be ridiculous, wouldn't it? If you were using Chef Server, the master one, which I'm not, incidentally, you could connect it over a web interface. You could do this in code. Imagine that, do it in code. There's a web interface, and you can say for that particular node or this group of machines, these are the recipes that I want to apply. Let me just zoom in on that a little bit for you. So these are recipes I want to apply. In some cases, you can see a two-part name, a name, colon, colon, and another one. In some cases, you don't, like sudo and NCP. If you see a two-part name, like chef client, colon, colon, service, the second name is a recipe and the first name is a cookbook. If you see one name, NTP, that's a cookbook, we're using the default recipe. Okay? So we've said, for either this particular node or this group of machines. These are the recipes. This is my run list. I want the Parma ham and melon. I want the beef Wellington. Then I want profiteroles. Hang on a minute, not finished. Cheese and biscuits. Go on then, liqueur, limoncello, whatever. What order do you want them in? Okay, run list. So that's your classification. Now you can do that on a master if you've got one, and you could do it via web interface. Or you could do it in code. And if you do it in code, this gives you the opportunity, if you're going to manage this without a master, like I'm doing with 20 machines, he didn't stick around to see if it worked. We're filming it. When I said to the machine, okay, drop down the chef installer, drop down the cookbooks, drop down this run list file. I did take this file, I'll show you the file in a minute. Install chef, run chef, show it this file, go for a brew. This run list says install the recipe called Windows, imagine : default, install SQL Server, the server version, don't want the client tools version, and install the default recipe for Azure SDK. Is a run list. Okay? In fact, let me show you that file. I've easily taken 15 minutes, particularly with the condiments gag. That's padded us out nicely, isn't it? But if I just show you one of the files, we sent it Node.json. This one. So this is the file I passed in. Thanks, guys. Safe trip. So I sent via PowerShell script, go on, install chef, download the cookbooks, download this run list, give it to chef, step away, do your demos, is what I did on 20 machines. I'm feeling a bit nervous, I don't know, maybe not nervous. You don't look like dangerous people, and what's the worst that could happen? That, you know, it doesn't work. I've easily taken 15 minutes, particularly with the condiments gag. That's padded us out nicely, isn't it? But if I just show you one of the files, we sent it Node.json. This one. So this is the file I passed in. Thanks, guys. Safe trip. So I sent via PowerShell script, go on, install chef, download the cookbooks, download this run list, give it to chef, step away, do your demos, is what I did on 20 machines. I'm feeling a bit nervous, I don't know, maybe not nervous. You don't look like dangerous people, and what's the worst that could happen? That, you know, it doesn't work. Just prolong the agony just a bit longer. Cookbooks, going to write cookbooks. We've got a Docker hub, we've got anything like that? Yeah, we've got the supermarket. There's a thing called a chef supermarket. You're not the only person going to be writing cookbooks. So chef have got a thing called the chef supermarket. You go to the supermarket, you search for cookbooks, MySQL, SQL Server, Visual Studio. You find it, get yourself a hit, you hit your button, you download it. And remember, there's no install. It gives you a zip, you crack open the zip. As long as you put that directory in the cookbooks directory, you've got yourself a cookbook. Okay? So there is this thing called a chef supermarket. Now, the thing with the chef supermarket is, it's chefs. So they write a cookbook, they put it in here, but then other people write cookbooks and put them in there as well. Vendors. Imagine you're a vendor, and back in the day you wanted people to use your software, so you had to create DVD. Before that, DVD, what do you have? Floppy disks. Do you have floppy disks? I remember buying Visual Studio. First copy of Visual Studio I bought 33, there were 32 3.5 inch, or was it 3 1/4? 3 and a bit, thruppeny bit discs. Then came DVDs, it's like, whoa, nosebleed. DVDs, now it's download your ISO, get on with it. Now, just pop it, there's a cookbook. Drop the cookbook on the machine, say to chef, fetch, done, installs, okay? I could write a cookbook, stick it up there. Kevin in his mum's basement could write a cookbook. Basement, I think is the word I was looking for. Gosh, coding in the, that'd make a bit of a meme, wouldn't it? In the basin. Edit that out. You don't know what you're getting. Now, if you look in the supermarket, you'll be able to identify the provenance of these cookbooks. It was written by chef. Go on and I'll give it a whirl. It was written by Microsoft. It was written by Apache. Yeah, okay, I'll trust those. Someone called Kevin or someone called Starchild or Wayland Enterprises, barge pole, don't touch. Okay? Is all I'm saying. Right. Sits down, stands up again. So yes, you can have a master. Now, if you like the idea of a master, but you don't want to install your own Chef master, server, Chef have got a feature called Hosted Chef. So you log in, you create an account, you go to Hosted Chef, you create an organization. It's you. And then it will manage them for you. So you do all the classification in this web console, but this is a highly available, robust, reliable, central master for you to use. And one thing they'll point out is that, okay, there's lots of organizations on this, quotes, server. No asset of yours can be seen, touched, modified by any other organization. They are kept apart. Let's see if they're running, and then we can do the puppet thing, because I'm conscious that I'm running on a bit, but I do that. Oh, look at those green lights. Should we pick one at random? I should pick two, really, shouldn't I? But let's pick this one. So I'm going to say, let me connect to that. Let me RDP to that. So before I turn it into soup, let me at least see what the problem is. So let's connect. It needs to give me the Windows password. How do I get the password? I've got to give it a key file. Go get my key file. So if I go to, where was I? There's my key file. It's my RSA key. It's an AWS thing, don't worry about it. But if I just grab that password, that's strong, isn't it, that password? Click on this. So remember, what I spun up were, way back when, probably giving up the will to live now, but I spun up a blank Windows 2008 Windows server. And then I installed Chef. Well, I didn't install Chef. I passed it a PowerShell script that says install Chef, download his cookbooks, and then get on there, SQL Server, SQL Express, the class files for our TSQL course, chuck in Notepad++ and Chrome just for a bit of flavor. Do that. Well, already, I'm breathing easy because Chrome's on the desktop, so that's good. Chrome's on the taskbar. Woo, thank you very much. But wait, I'm not finished. So if I come down here, let's go. Notepad++, look at that, Notepad++. That's cool. Hey, I'm not even done. Just be patient. Look at this. If I come down, let me just make that a little bit so I can zoom in. All programs, SQL Server 2012. Get Management Studio running. Now we can start getting excited. While we wait for that, let's take a look on the disk. Is there a directory called courseware? Yes, there is. For a course called QA TSQL? Yes, there is. Has it got all the files we need for that course? Yes, it has. Yeah? Don't ask me to show you the 19, because they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. So that's the kind of thing Chef does. Yeah, I could have put Visual Studio on there. I've got a recipe for Visual Studio. It works. The recipe knows, go and get the ISO, download it, crack it open, it knows. So we're happy with what Chef does? Yeah. Okay, listen, it's 5 to 4, it's touching 4. So I'll jump straight into the puppet and then we'll do the Q&A at the end, if that's okay. Okay. So if you're here for the Chef, just suffer the puppet. And Suffer the Puppet, that should be the name for a band, shouldn't it? Suffer the Puppet. Suffer the Puppet. Anyway, so listen, I've got some news. I mentioned earlier that I had everything I do is about. I want the Staples That's Easy button. This to me is what it's all about. Figure a thing out, code it. I don't have to figure it out again. I have to remember it next week. Hit a button, done. So I was talking about this and talking about synchronicity. I was talking about this on Tuesday, and I was talking about this yesterday, and then I got an email from my colleague Matt, and he's the principal technologist for Amazon Web Services, just back from the conference in Las Vegas, and said, guys, I'm just back from the conference, got some swag, because you do. I've got a spare Internet of Things button that can talk to AWS, get AWS to do anything you like. So I said, I've come up with a funky thing that when I hit it, emails me my bill. If you can think of a better idea, you can have one. I went, oh, yes. I've got a demo on Monday to the CEO, well, not CEO, the IT director, and I've got this cunning plan. And this cunning plan is, bearing in mind that all that happened when I said to EC2, launch machine, here's a PowerShell script. That's one line of code. I could do that with a button. And I'm already imagining box wrapped, arrives at IT director's desk, wrapped up with open me, with a little note saying, do not push till 4 o'clock. I'm on the WebEx at 5 to 4, on the WebEx. Have you got your button? Okay. Are you watching the screen? Okay. Push your button. Only, that's what I want to do, but I wouldn't have been able to test it. There's so many things that could possibly go wrong. So I need to get to Leeds, where his office is, try it from Leeds without him noticing, then leave the building, and then have him push the button. But it's going to be fantastic. Imagine an Internet of Things button that you can push. 5 years ago, drinking beer in Helsinki, and it's all come down to this. It's worth the wait. It really was. Puppet. Everything I said for Chef, same for Puppet. Does the same thing, pretty much. In fact, back in the day, there was Puppet. One of the chaps at Puppet thought, oh, that's okay, but you know, the metaphor's rubbish. I mean, all we've got is a tool called Geppetto, and that's your lot. And even that's a bit embarrassing. So went off and created Chef. But they're both fundamentally based upon Ruby code. They both do the same thing. They solve the same problem in pretty much the same way. Clearly there are differences. But for the most part, the same thing. So let's take a look at some Puppet. There's some code. And already we go, oh, package, service, bits of Ruby code. Now he's got a file. Why has this got a file? Because I've already done a slide with a template on. Both these tools do the same thing. They both do packages, they do files, they do templates, they do services, they do users, they do groups, they do cron jobs. All the things you'd want to do with a machine, they do it. They both have the if desperate resource, which one calls exec and one calls execute, which is if there isn't a thing there to do what you want, give us a line of command line, we'll run it for you. So it's a file with some code in. Now what Puppet do, probably more devy, they give it a class name. There's still a file with some code in, but it has a class definition. So okay, so this, we can't call it a recipe, because that'll get you shot. This is a manifest, it's a class. It's a class. Okay. Give it a name. The name's important, the class name's important. Okay, so you're going to write manifests, not recipes. What did you do about cookbooks? Cookbooks, schmuckbooks. Modules, we call them modules. Okay. But are they just like cookbooks, really? Yeah, okay. They're just like cookbooks, really, but we call them modules. Okay. So if you're writing Puppet code, you write classes and you put them in modules. You don't write recipes and put them in cookbooks. But what you're doing in each case is writing a file with a list of resources that you put with other files in a directory and you give to the tool of your choice. Where do we put the modules? In a directory called modules. Fancy that. Okay. We have a directory called files. We have one called templates. It's just that instead of one called recipes, we have one called manifests. Instead of a default.rb, we have an init.pp. This is detail. I mean, if you're that interested, we do courses. Come on, come back. Or read a book or Google it. But that's detail. We're just after the high level stuff. So Puppet is about, you have a manifest. It's a list of things you do. And in the same way as with Chef, you'd give it a run list and you'll say, well, I want that recipe, I want that recipe, I want that recipe. Well, in Puppet, you'll say, I want that class, this class, and the other class. With Chef, you've got to get them in the right order. Now, here's the thing with Puppet. If Puppet realizes, hang on a minute, that really needs to go there, it will do so. It doesn't rewrite your code, but when a node checks in, say, hello, I'm web server 19, it loads up the code and goes, oh, I'll rearrange that, I'll be better, sends it off. So if there are any dependencies, if we look at this, for example, let me back up. This file requires Apache 2. So you write them in that order, duh. Well, when this gets longer and longer, more unwieldy, you're going to get things in the wrong order because I don't know, we'll sort them alphabetically. By the time they leave and they go out to the node, they will have been rearranged in order. With Chef, that's down to you. Okay? Modules. So how do we classify? What's the equivalent of the run list? Well, we don't call it a run list in Puppet speak. They just say you're classifying. But you'll find a node or a group of nodes. Let's say you've got a group of nodes and you've called this group of nodes web servers. You come along and you add in one or more classes. And then when those nodes check in, they have those classes applied. You could do it in code, and you could do this on the server. And on the server, you'd list the nodes by name. Can you imagine this on a server? Node 1, do this. Node 2, do that. Node 3, do this. Node 4432, do that. Good luck with that. No. You might use some kind of regular expression and say, okay, well, if it has within the name web node, then some kind of 3-digit bit on the end, okay, we'll do the following. So you can classify on the master in code, or if I reverse for a minute, you can classify on the master with the GUI. You can use the GUI if you're using Puppet Enterprise, the one you pay for. If you want to use Puppet open source, no GUI, write your code. Okay? It's a thing. There are other tools, third-party tools you can use to give you some kind of GUI, but the one supplied by Puppet, that's a Puppet Enterprise. First 10 for free, after that, you're paying licenses. But Chef has got a similar mechanism. Oh, well, Chef's got the supermarket, Puppet's got the forge. What's the difference? None. It's a place you go and get modules. So the Puppet forge is where you go and download modules that Puppet or other people, Kevin in the Basin, wrote. You just go and you find out. A thing to think about if you're going to be downloading, if you're going to try this out, you're going to try out a module. Take note of this, Puppet supported, Puppet approved. You make that out on the slide? Puppet supported, Puppet approved. So a Puppet supported, that's a short list, but it's only like the top 5. View all. Puppet supported modules are the ones written by Puppet. So clearly they support those. Puppet approved are written by someone else, but they've checked it out, they've tested it, they're happy with it, they approve it, go for it. Kevin is in none of those lists. You're not going to see Wayland Enterprises in these. Yeah. Either way, you're going to find a feedback mechanism. People rate it. How many times has it been downloaded? Who likes it? Got 1 star, got 5 stars. Go for the 5 stars. So when you're learning this stuff, download a couple of modules or cookbooks, figure them out. When you've picked one you're going to use one, before you write your own MySQL or your own Nginx cookbook or module, is the one already there off the shelf? Download it, maybe tweak it, put it into production. It too, you can have a master and you can have the agents. It too, you can do what I did before, and I'll do this in a minute, and this will be the big finish. I say big, maybe I bigged it up a bit. The finish, where we won't have a master. I'm just going to pass a bash script to an Ubuntu machine. And that bash script will do essentially what I did before, which is download an installer for Puppet, download the manifests that Puppet's going to need, the module, excuse me, install Puppet and say go. So the sort of thing you do to build out an infrastructure that you are managing without the aid of a master. That's an architecture thing. I'm interested in the Puppet built me that thing. So I'll just do that demo and then we're just about done. Okay. So let me just jump back into here for a minute. They're still running. Well, provided I shut them down the next 10 minutes, I won't go over and have to put more on my expenses. I'm going to launch a machine. This machine is going to be an Ubuntu machine. So give me an Ubuntu machine, a vanilla Ubuntu machine, which again, trust me, all that's on there is Ubuntu and some stuff that Amazon Web Services put on there. Nothing of mine. This doesn't have to be so big, because it's just going to install Apache and a web file. So I'll go for an M4 large. I'm going to run 1. We've proved I can spin up 20, that was good. Okay, my bootstrap script. So this one I want a file, and again I'll show you the file once it's launching. If I go into Puppet, my bootstrap script, which I'll talk you through shortly, but as I've said, its job is to download and install Puppet, download the modules that I want, download the run list, and say to Puppet, crack on. That's its job. 4 things. Okay, storage, no, there's nothing there. What do you want to call this? The Puppet demo. Security group. Oh, do you want port 22 open? Well, actually, no, I don't. I've got no intention of SSHing into this node because it's going to be a web app. What I do want to do is open up port 80. Let me get rid of 22. If this thing doesn't work, I'll just throw it away. Soup. Croutons. If there isn't a web page, it's going to be my script, it's not going to be the machine. Croutons, don't know where that came from. So launch a machine, give me a key, the Puppet key, which I'm not going to need because I'm not going to SSH into it. No. Pardon?
You've got 20 running.
I've got 20 running. Thank you for that. Just checking. So if I'll get rid of some. Wow. So I should have shut them down, shouldn't I? Let's get rid of all these. We'll cut that bit out of the video. Okay. We could do anything. I'll just get rid of a couple. Yeah. So how far back did you realise this isn't going to work because you've got 20 running? Right, okay, thanks for that. But he's sat there going... Yeah. Everything from good morning and welcome would probably be good. So launch Ubuntu machine. Where's Ubuntu machine? Okay, don't get flapped, Phil. Everything's going okay. Down for large. That's marvelous. Details. Go get that bootstrapping script. So file. Choose file. That one, which I'll talk you through in a moment. Add storage. Yeah. Whatever. Puppet. Demo. Security group. Do the SSH bit, yeah. Talk about croutons, delete that one, hit review, hit launch, pick your key, say you don't need it, you're going commando, hit the button, brilliant. Do you remember your first car? My first car was an Escort Mark 1. I remember Escort Mark 1. Anyone old enough to know Escort Mark 1? It was a bit ropey, that Escort Mark 1. The three of us went to, I was an apprentice at British Telecom. This is back in the very, very early 80s. Anyway, you couldn't get away with it these days, but every lunchtime we'd go to the Gorton Brook for a beer. And three of us had Escort Mark 1s. Now the thing with an Escort Mark 1, don't know if you know this, you could open it with a penny. Okay? So this guy back nodding, you weren't at college with me, were you? You could open an Escort Mark 1 with a penny. You could start an Escort Mark 1 with any key. Okay? Unless, of course, it was mine, which is a bit problematic. So when it became lunchtime, we're off to Gorton Brook. The first one out took the best Escort. The last one to get there got mine. Yeah. But I had this mantra, whenever I got in my Escort, would be I'd get in there, I'd hold my key, or, I don't know, coat hanger, I'd go, please start. And that's my mantra I go through whenever I'm doing a demo. So, is that running? We've got a green light. We should almost be there. While we're waiting for that, because yesterday was a bit premature and I didn't give it like a minute. It's got to do a health test. Oh, I've got a green light. Look at that. Oh, is that one of the... That's a chef one. Where's my puppet one? Puppet demo. Is that the one? Come on. Not quite ready. Let me just show you that bootstrap script. Puppet demo, bootstrap script. So this is the code I passed in. This is me spinning up a machine. Downloading the installer for Puppet. Doing that get update. Installing Puppet. Jumping into the Puppet directory, which now exists. Downloading my, my cookbook. Downloading my module. Unzipping my module. Downloading my run list. I've not showed you my run list yet. Once I've downloaded the run list, I'll then say to Puppet, off you go, I'm off for a brew. That's it. So let me just show you Site PP, the equivalent of the chef run list. Site PP says this. Put the DevOps demo on, put that class on. So you'd list the classes. Oh, I got the wrong class. Put that on. Right, so we're ready for the Hello World demo, and then we're just about done. Is that, rather than do the refresh, that's got to be ready, that machine's got to be ready. So let's get the IP, jump into a browser, deep breath, please start, get in. I thank you. So that's Chef and Puppet. That's Chef, that's Puppet, that's what they do. They build machines. They don't spin up the machines, although Chef provisioning can now spin them up. Chef has got a tool called Knife, and it's got a plug-in called Knife EC2, and that can spin machines up for you. Okay? However the machines come into being, that's kind of a problem you still need to solve. But once you've got a node, if you can get Chef or Puppet Agent on there, with or without a master, and find a way to get it the cookbook or the module and just say, go, to do the rest. And that's either a one-off spin up a machine or check in with a master every 30 minutes thing and make sure they don't drift. That's the problem that they solved. That wasn't my car, by the way. Those hubcaps are too shiny.